You're welcome back. You're still watching Business Morning on Channels Television. Now, oil prices slipped but remain near $75 per barrel today as crude stockpiles in the United States. The world's top oil consumer fell last week to their lowest since January 2020, and imports and production also dropped. Brent crude oil futures fell 5 cents to $74.69 a barrel, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude oil futures slipped by 4 cents to $72.35 a barrel. Crude inventories fell by 4.1 million barrels in the week to July 23rd, helped by lower imports and a decline in weekly production. Gasoline stocks also dropped, bringing them largely in line with pre-pandemic levels. Well, for more on the oil market and other commodities-related issues, we have Nosike Wajude. He's a research analyst with financial derivatives, and he joins us for the second time this week to discuss the commodities. Hi, Nosike. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Good morning. So we see that oil slipped, and it's connected to the fall in the U.S. Stockpiles dropped in the U.S. What's happening there?
U.S. stockpile. The fall in U.S. stockpiles basically mean that oil consumption is picking up. Basically, your stockpiles, your inventory levels where you store the oil, and if it's depleting, it means that consumption it's rising basically. And compared to hasn't been this low since January 2020 before the pandemic, and countries had to shut down. The U.S. economy had to shut down. The U.S. economy is the largest consumer of oil globally, and obviously the things that consumption levels in the U.S. will affect global prices. We can see that it went above $75 per barrel, but slipped. That slip is obviously the concerns over rising COVID cases, especially with the Delta variant in the U.S. We had that in the past 2 weeks, cases of Delta variant specifically have risen by 144%. Right now, COVID cases, about 83% of all COVID cases are the Delta variant. Hospitalizations are on the rise, and the fatalities are also on the rise. So that, obviously, the oil markets will take that into consideration. It's taking that into consideration already. It's typically this time of the year, it's the summer driving season. But obviously, because of COVID, that impact hasn't really come into effect the way ordinarily would. It ordinarily would. The vaccinated people are going about their business.
Yeah, because I wanted to say that the impact of the Delta variant and third wave in Nigeria and some other number of waves in other countries is not as much as before. So it seems with more people getting vaccinated,
people economies are returning to normalization of things across much of the advanced world, because the deployment of vaccines has been much more in the advanced world than in the emerging markets or the not so developed parts of the world like Africa and places South America and Asia. But in America, where as much as about 50% of people have gotten 2 jabs of the vaccine, have been completely vaccinated in the EU and the US. So those countries are slowly returning to normal, even if there's a spike in COVID cases. The people who have been vaccinated are returning to their businesses. Restaurants are open. Outdoor activity is going. About stadiums, people are returning to stadiums. So sports activities, the economy is just slowly.
And that's actually what we saw in the UK too. You know, they had the Freedom Day, the July 19th.
Yes.
Yeah, and in spite of a spike in cases, they still went ahead with that. And
yes. So the vaccinations are crucial for a return of the global economy back to normal. If the economic recovery is going to happen as fast as it should, then more and more countries should do more to make sure that vaccines are deployed to the nooks and the crannies, to just people, so that people can outdoor activity. Without vaccinations, we cannot return to.
So that leaves, the developing countries down there, waiting for
handouts. Handouts from
I didn't want to use the word.
Yeah,
because you're not into production and you're not even paying for it, so you're waiting for when it can get streamed.
You are at the mercy of these advanced countries because obviously, what is when they are done with their own vaccinations.
Obviously, you can't love another person more than you love yourself.
Definitely not. So as soon as they're done with their vaccinations, then they can look towards the rest of the world, especially for the airline businesses to return to what it was this time 2 years ago. You will need vaccinations to take place globally, because as it is, there are still restrictions in place, even from the US and in the EU, where you have high levels of vaccinations. There are still restrictions in place for airlines, carriers taking non-US citizens to the US. They can leave the US, but non-US citizens coming to the US as it is. There's no metric as to what needs to be done for those restrictions to be taken off. So I think they're playing it safe and just making sure that the rest of the world attains very high levels of vaccinations before they can remove restrictions and everyone carry on as usual.
And I know in Nigeria, we don't hear anything about the restricting economic activities, because the last time we tried it, we did not have enough buffer.
We don't have enough buffers to support another lockdown. It's not even an option at this point. So you can see the supplementary budget had healthcare in it. So we would do as much, the government will do as much as it can to maybe get as many vaccines as it can. There's still a lot of people who are suspicious of the vaccines. So I think more needs to be done in terms of
highlights education.
Yes, educating and enlightening people as to the benefits of the vaccines. Look, if we have these vaccines, we can return to normal. The alternative is another lockdown, which we cannot afford. So more people need to be.
And yes, another alternative is actually local production of vaccine. I mean, like a lot of people have talked about, it's not just about starting from scratch to produce.
Yeah, obviously
if you have an international company come into a local pharmaceutical company, to begin production.
But I think I don't think that's something that could be done in the near term. That's something in the future. Okay, in the future, let's what are the modalities for this sort of thing? In the event of another global, it's not something we pray for. In the event of another global pandemic, and given the large population of Nigerians, can we have these big pharmaceuticals coming and produce vaccines for the local population? I mean, something that we plan.
All right, but anyway, at least the International Monetary Fund has retained its projection for Nigeria's economic growth prospect at 2.5. So in spite of the fact that we don't have enough vaccines or vaccination, there's still the retainment of this growth projection.
That's hinged on deepening economic reforms. There's reforms going on with policy, the petroleum industry bill. There's reforms in the exchange rate policy as well. There's also increase in, we have our oil quota, OPEC quota, increased to 1.8. That will go up gradually. And oil prices recovering to about 75. So it's all looking well and good. Now and into next year, where hopefully we'll have vaccines and we'll solve insecurity and hopefully take away the subsidies. The IMF themselves highlighted the impact of especially fuel subsidies. You take away fuel subsidies, you have enough funding to channel to infrastructure, for instance, where it's necessary to support businesses and lower the cost of doing business, improve the ease of doing business. And also external funding. Now that much of the forecast is predicated on external financing conditions continuing to remain favorable, so we can get a euro bond at favorable rates. We expect to have some IMF funding. Hopefully by the end of the year. If we can have that, it would improve forex liquidity. Obviously funding for infrastructure, like I've said. So those things are, the forecast is predicated on these things. Hopefully,
you mentioned the PIB, which still has its ups and downs here.
Yes.
So we hope that actually scales through, because we thought we were done with the controversy and the delays.
Yeah, we thought we were done until the details of the bill came to the fore, and there's some uproar about the host communities.
The host community
wanting about 10% initially.
Yeah, 5%. I think that's what they're asking for. Currently, there's 3%.
There's 3 and 5. I mean, the initial bill, when then the bill was proposed, I mean, they were asking for 10%. Now it's down to 5 and 3, and then there's some people not entirely being happy with the amount being going to the to the Frontier Fund at a time when the world is slowly moving to renewable forms of energy. You want to channel as much as 30% of NNPC profits to the Frontier Fund. Some people are not happy with that. You know, you want to give 30% here, but you lower 10% to 3%. There's that agitation. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and we wonder when that controversy will be resolved, because I mean, we voted for this PIB bill for 14, over 10 years now. Yes,
14 years.
And now we see another set off.
Yes, but hopefully, I mean, if since it's just down to the numbers, the PIB, the major thing with the PIB is the investment it was supposed to attract, the fiscal terms, that has been made clear. Or those the terms have been made clear, and I think that's already set, and that problem, those numbers have been set, so to speak. So the agitation now is the host communities and the Frontier Fund. I mean, if that is resolved, I mean, it's more internal. That's resolved, then hopefully the bill can be signed into law, becomes an act, and becomes law, and then we can.
And then the subsidy will be off.
Yeah, subsidy will be off, and we know it will not be as easy as.
And then we'll start facing reality.
And reality of. Market forces determining the price of
the
fuel.
Price. I wonder if that day will come. Well, we also have the issue. I mean, one of the conditions that the IMF has considered is the increase in our crude production.
Okay.
But we have the challenge of crude thefts. Also facing our production.
Yeah, it's something that's something that some people say is here to stay. I mean, if you produce 1.8 million barrels a day, I mean, over the years we hear of a huge chunks, as much as 20% of that 1.8 million barrels a day is off. Or goes under the table. As there's 1.8 and there's another 20% of that is done illegally and refined in some makeshift refinery in the creeks, modular refinery in the creeks and sold. And it's something that you would need a lot more than just talk, and you need to properly, if you can make those modular, there's some mechanism for turning those modular refineries into bringing them mainstream. Then given that we want to completely deregulate the downstream sector, then that's something that should be at the forefront of their push towards
Okay, so both the IMF and the World Bank had warned that developing countries unable to afford the cost of vaccines could lag as the global economy recovers from the ruin. But we have the supplementary budget, I mean, like I discussed with Julumi in the first segment. Can the supplementary budget actually make a difference?
Well, given what it's targeted at, given the objective, healthcare and insecurity, insecurity for every investor, insecurity is obviously the number one thing you look at. If you see that the capital importation, FDI is what creates jobs. FDI is just about 8%, about $77 million.
Yeah, FDI has gone down.
Down to $77 million.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you need to solve insecurity. For anyone, any investor anywhere wants to send their monies to Nigeria, the first thing, the primary thing is security. What's the security situation? If it's not good enough, then we stop. Or we put a hold on every investment decision that concerns Nigeria. So if you solve insecurity, domestically, we can begin to go out. Businesses, traders can go about their business. Investors overseas can say, okay, insecurity is solved. Let's invest in Nigeria. That's what will create jobs. So if you have a budget that's channeled towards tackling insecurity. That means procuring equipment, gathering intelligence,
we got the
training.
Tucano that just came in.
I mean, Tucano comes in. That's helpful for from air to ground bombing and all whatnot. But you need intelligence. Intelligence gathering in this day and age is the main thing. Because these bandits or criminals or terrorists also have their own intelligence. They probably have, I mean, let's talk about them having people within the government or within the military who send them information. So you need to do much more in terms of weeding out these people, ensuring that you are ahead of the terrorists and the bandits in terms of data gathering, knowing where they are, knowing what they are planning to do, where they're going, and equipment in not just equipment, but training personnel as well. Let's talk about personnel not being trained for tackling banditry.
Well,
that sort of talk.
You know, sometimes when we talk about intelligence and dealing with insecurity, it doesn't seem like as a country we lack this intelligence. Like you said, these bandits and criminals may actually have some moles, you know. Perhaps it's a matter of welfare and motivation, you know, to make this intelligence and welcome.
Yeah, I mean, there's that aspect as well. I mean, all comes down to funding. You need to improve the welfare of the military personnel, of the police. Just fund the security agencies, welfare, equipment, motivate them, let them carry out their duties to the best of their abilities, and this insecurity will be solved. That's just what it is. And you can obviously there'll be some assistance from more advanced economies, their own intelligence gathering, their own equipment. You can also parley with the neighboring countries. Chad, at some point, the Chadian army had almost completely decimated Boko Haram from their end of their side of the border, and they ran to this side and have almost in Maiduguri or Borno, have been able to carve out some local governments for themselves. So it just shows that we
even learned that they hoisted their flag.
We didn't match the efforts of the Chadians at the time. So it's something that obviously funding is a way of tackling that problem if channeled correctly.
Well, another story that's making the rounds these days from Tuesday is the order or the decision by the CBN, you know, not to sell FX to the BDCs. And today we see the Naira is hovering about 523, 522. And some people say this is one of the impacts and that it's going to get even worse. Yeah, it's deja vu. I mean, it's happened in 2016, something very similar happened. There was a discontinuation of sales to BDCs and there was a depreciation of the currency at the parallel market. It's something that we expected. The one thing that may be different from what happened in 2016 is I think the CBN expects that there's going to be an increase in the supply of foreign exchange. Now, from higher oil prices, higher oil production, maybe some external funding, we'll have an increase in forex inflows. And something even more crucial is that right now, what's supposed to go to the BDCs is going to the commercial banks. Yes. Are there modalities in place to ensure that those banks are able to supply forex to those who need it, the same way the BDCs would? Because BDC is targeted towards retail investors. They're supposed to sell each BDC is supposed to be about $5,000 a day, but we know they did much more. So are there modalities in place to ensure that these commercial banks are able to push out these forex, these dollars or foreign exchange to those who need it as quickly as they need it? Because one of the biggest problems is when you're unable to get the forex as quickly as you want it, that you resort to the parallel market. If you're not able to get as much as you want, you go to the parallel market. So there's that demand in the parallel market. And the documentation is rather burdensome. It is. It's very rigorous. So some people will just don't want the hassle and go to the parallel market. So that demand is almost constant. Just that, okay, if they can just speed up the process. Can I apply for forex and get it today, tomorrow? Is it possible? If you shorten the process, then you can. And if you signal to the market that there's increased, if you intervene in the market and say that you supply 200-300 million on a weekly basis, and the market is sure that's getting the supply, then maybe we won't see the parallel market depreciates to maybe the 550 that some people are projecting. But we know that in the short term, there's going to be some depreciation. Well, I mean, in all of this, it's not like the BDCs are out of the picture. No, where are they supposed to get their supply from now? There are other sources, but obviously, people who come into Nigeria from wherever and sell. Obviously, if the market rate is a 410, 411, and the BDC guy is buying from you at 520 or 517, it's a no-brainer that you would sell to him. Of course. It's a no-brainer. So that market will always exist. It's not just going to be supplied by the CBN any longer. All right, so talk us through the price developments in the global commodities market. Well, global commodities, at the moment, we're seeing wheat prices rise, and that's because of increased demand. And one thing you have to note, wheat is one of Nigeria's major agric imports, and wheat is on the CBN's one of the 44 items, or 44 items have been banned from and forex not being allocated for the import of these commodities. So if you have your parallel market rate rising to 525, it means wheat imports are going to become, not just wheat imports, but every agri commodity that we import is going to be more expensive, which would feed into
basically food inflation forecast. And we expect the expectation or the forecast is that in Q3, inflation will continue to decline because it's the harvest season. So now that we have that harvest season, the increase in output, increase in agri products, agri outputs from the harvest season, we also have an increase in price from imported agri money. So that tapering of prices may not.
So how come inflation will go down and yet prices will be
we're not sure that inflation won't fall as quickly as we had expected.
Okay, partly because of
the
this
imported inflation.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, Nasike. Always a pleasure having you on the show.
Always a pleasure being here. Thank you.
And enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Okay, so we'll take a break now, and Business Morning continues right after that. Stay with us.